The Catacombs of San Sebastiano, a hypogeum cemetery in Rome, rising along Via Appia Antica, in the Ardeatino Quarter. They are one of the very few Christian burial places that have always been accessible. The first of the former 4 floors is now almost completely destroyed. The toponym. In ancient times the catacombs were simply known with the name in Catacombos, a Greek term composed by 2 words, kata and kimb, literally meaning close to the cavity. Actually, along the Appian Way, close to the cemetery, an evident dip in the ground is visible even now. Moreover, before its employment as a burial ground, the area was occupied by pozzolan mines, now placed about 10 meters above the floor of the Basilica of San Sebastiano fuori la Mura. These mines gave rise to a pagan cemetery, then used by Christians. The word catacombos, through a process of extension and assimilation, was gradually used to identify all the hypogeum burial sites, thus simply called catacombs. The underground graveyard, called di San Sebastiano since early Middle Ages, was formerly known as in memoria apostolorum. A toponym referred to the presence within the catacomb, for some time, of the relics of the apostles Peter and Paul. In effect, the Depositio Martyrum, at the date of the 29th of June, talks about the recurrence of Peter in Catacombos and Paul on Via Ostiensis. The Martyrologium Hieronymianum, at the same date, cites the recurrence of Peter in Vatican, Paul on Via Ostiensis and Utrumque in Catacombos, Tuscoe Basso Consulibus. The martyrs of the cemetery. Ancient sources attest the presence of 3 martyrs within the cemetery on the Appian Way: Sebastian, Quirinus and Eutychius. The names of the martyrs are mentioned in a 7th century catalogue, called Notula Oliorum, while the early Middle Ages itineraries for pilgrims do not cite Eutychius, because its sepulchre was hard to reach. As regards Sebastian, the Depositio Martyrum remembers his death in his entombment in Catacombos on the 20th of January. Little is known about him. Saint Ambrose tells that he was born in Milan and that suffered martyrdom in Rome during the persecution of Diocletian. The 5th century Passio refers that he was a soldier from Narbonne, in Gaul, born of a family from Milan and died in Rome under Diocletian. His relics stood in the catacomb until the 9th century, then they were moved within the town walls and now are kept on the Appian Way again, in the chapel of St. Sebastian in the basilica above the cemetery. Quirinus was a bishop of Cesena, in Pannonia, whose relics were moved to Rome by pilgrims from that region between 4th and 5th century. Nothing is known about Eutychius but his grave, discovered during excavations carried out in the 20th century in a crumbly area of the catacombs. A poem dedicated to him, by Pope Damasus I, is now displayed at the entry of the basilica. History. Thanks to the excavations carried out at the end of 19th and during the 20th century, it was possible to recreate the topographic and architectural history of the area, consisting of 3 levels of galleries, in which the catacombs lie. Formerly the area was a pozzolan mine. It was abandoned at the end of the 2nd century and then used by Romans as a place for pagan burial. Simple graves for slaves and freedmen have been discovered, as well as monumental tombs, particularly in the so-called piazzola, a circular compartment that formerly was an open cast mine, in which walls 3 mausoleums were dug. The presence, in these mausoleums and particularly in the so-called Mausoleum of Innocentiores, of typically Christian iconographies, such as the anchor and the fish, suggests that the mausoleums were used, at a later stage, also for the sepulture of Christians. Beside the piazzola, the dig of the cemetery galleries was started in this period. Around the half of the 3rd century the whole piazzola was filled in, so as to create an embankment at an upper level. 3 monuments have been brought to light on this shelf. The so-called triclea, a covered porticoed hall used for burial banquets, whose walls display more than 600 graffiti with invocations to the apostles Peter and Paul, a marble upholstered edicule that, according to archaeologists, was the place where the relics of the two apostles were kept during the period when they were moved in catacombs, and a covered room with a well to draw water. The transfer of the relics of the apostles to San Sebastiano in the mid-3rd century and their relocation in the former places at the beginning of the 4th century is still a debated issue among researchers and archaeologists. Finally, in the first half of the 4th century also these spaces were buried, in order to build the embankment on which the Constantinian basilica was erected. Description: within the right nave of the former basilica, rebuilt in 1933 above ancient remains, is it possible to see on the left the arches connecting with the middle nave of the present church, walled up in the 13th century, and the exterior of the apse of the Chapel of Relics. Here are gathered some sarcophagi, both entire and fragmentary, discovered during the excavations. A ladder leads to the tunnels, with several cubicles. Here, the paintings of Jonah's cubicle, dating back to the end of the 4th century and depicting 4 scenes of the life of the prophet, are quite outstanding. The restored crypt of Saint Sebastian houses an altar shelf replacing the former one and the bust of Saint Sebastian attributed to Bernini. Soon after there is the lay-by, under which lies a sandstone cavity that perhaps gave rise to the name ad catacombs, given to this cemetery and then extended to the other ones. In the lay-by rise 3 more cella dating back to the second half of the 2nd century, later reused. The first one on the right is externally decorated with paintings and still bears an inscription with the name of the owner, Marcus Claudius Hermes. The interior houses graves and pictures and shows of old decorated with the head of a gorgon. The second one, called Mausoleum of Innocentiores referring to the funeral college to which it belonged, has a vault decorated with refined stuccos. Some recesses show inscriptions with Greek characters but written in Latin, as well as a graffito with the initials of the Greek words meaning Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior. On the left there is the Mausoleum of the Adze, from the tool depicted on the exterior, whose decoration consists of shoots of vine sprouting from cantharoi placed on false pillars. Bibliography: De Santi Cell, by Amonte G. Le Catacombe di Roma, Newton and Compton Editori, Rome 1997. Ferrure, La Basilica e la Catacomba di S. Sebastiano, Vatican City 1990. Garducci, Pietro e Paolo sulla Via Appia e la tomba di Pietro in Vaticano, Vatican City 1983. Mancini G. Scavi sotto la Basilica di S. Sebastiano sull'Appia, in Notas e degli Scavi di Antichità, Rome 1923, pp. 3-79.